This week, there was a very sad story in the news. A 4-year-old girl was shot and killed during that road rage incident in Albuquerque you read about. A suspect is in custody, and also last week, Representative Michelle Lujan Grisham called for a task force on gun violence. And Sophie, boy, we haven't had time to talk about gun violence here in our state for quite a bit of time. But something's on the table now, isn't it? The city's horrified at this situation.
It is. I think it is a galvanizing situation. Unfortunately, I worry about how, as a nation, we said if Sandy Hook isn't the thing that gets us to talk about gun violence in a productive way,
right.
What will be?
That's right.
If this isn't the thing that gets New Mexico talking, what will be? I think that at this point, we are. What we hear on a national level and to a certain extent on the state level too is two excuses for not addressing this directly. The first is the constitutional excuse, the Second Amendment says. But the truth is that interpretation of the Second Amendment is very contemporary. As recently as 1939, the Supreme Court said in I think an important ruling, U.S. v. Miller, that the only really legitimate reason to have a gun is the military purpose. So do you have it for a military purpose? You don't in that ruling, therefore you don't get to keep it. That changed in the 80s it changed in 2008 with DC v. Heller. And I think that we're in a place, DC v. Heller was a 5-4 decision. We're in a place that if the Supreme Court shifted to a more liberal court, we might see again a reinterpretation of the Second Amendment. So I'm not sure that Second Amendment argument is as solid as many people think it is. The other thing that people say is it's too hard, and I'm sorry, that is the weakest argument, the most pathetic argument. It is too hard. The truth is, and we see this from so much research, gun violence is almost always an opportunistic crime, meaning, do I have a gun now?
Gotcha.
Do I have a gun now? And if we can reduce the number of people who can say, I have a gun now,
right.
or make it harder so that they have to go through a process to get that gun, research suggests that we can dramatically reduce the number of shooting deaths. And that's a goal we should be shooting for. I can't believe I just said that. Unintentional, but that's a goal we should be going for, and it is weak if we do not.
Right. Representative, interesting, there was, we had a chance to review Gwyneth Dolan, my colleague Gwyneth Dolan, interviewing some folks with some new ideas about guns and how to keep them out of the hands of people that we feel are dangerous out there. There's a lot of conflicting evidence out there. It's not necessarily a mental health issue. Mental health folks who are suffering tend to be more harmful to themselves and immediate people than the scourge of society that we make them out to be. However, the proposal is if you're in a family where families are saying, look, we feel there's a danger with this person in my house in combination with a gun, a mechanism for the police to come and confiscate that gun. Are you comfortable with the scenario in that regard?
Let me just say that part of the problem with this discussion is our lack of consistency. You know that there is a doctor who is recovering from horrible stab wounds. Now, the guns were removed.
Right.
It didn't matter. It did not matter. And she lost her husband and her son. My goodness.
That's a sad story.
So, and if you look at the data, of the gun violence that is there, what did their report say? 68% were used in suicides. And yet, as we talk about end-of-life decisions, we never include guns. So there is this inherent inconsistency going on. I think we're all going crazy over it, but I'm with Sophie that it is time to do something. So can we start with domestic violence? I think that would be a good place to start. I think it would be an even better place to start when parents go to the courts or the police and say, my son is pre-schizophrenic, he hasn't done anything yet, can you help me? And the answer is no. We have to change that.
That's right. That's right. Part of that proposal as well, Laura, I'm glad Representative mentioned domestic abuse and domestic violence. The situation that Sophie mentioned, the gun is at hand when you have a problem in the home, and they're feeling like, look, if there's some indicators that a person might be in fact violent at some point, that's the time to move, not wait until something happens or something almost happens that there's, grievous injury. But in fact, in somebody else's opinion, there could be potentially a problem here. Are you comfortable with that kind of a scenario in a domestic violence situation, to have those guns get out of the house?
Well, I think the problem is in somebody else's opinion.
Right.
And so where's that line drawn? Because it's very subjective, right? I mean, there's people who have, could have a range of emotional and mental problems, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're schizophrenic and in immediate, that their household members or themselves are in immediate danger. You know, does that mean that, you know, you're now creating a list of which mental health problems qualify for people to...
Got to throw in alcohol into that too.
Right, and alcohol.
Right.
was
But you know,
Big, exactly.
and this is obviously a really important aspect of the discussion, but this doesn't even cover the situation that just happened with a little girl getting killed. I mean, that was a road rage incident. And anybody who's driven the roads here in Albuquerque, you know, the interstate, there's a lot of these situations where people refuse to allow you to pass, you know, cut you off. There's a lot of that stuff going on. We have a cultural problem here in New Mexico about that, and it happens more here, I think, than in most other, well, I have experienced it more here than in other places where I've traveled, where people just get, you know, they become, I don't know, there's something competitive about being out on the roads where they refuse to allow people to pass. And I think in this situation, from what I understand, it was a situation of that sort where somebody felt like they weren't being allowed to pass for whatever reason. It certainly doesn't condone their use of a firearm. But I think there's multiple dimensions to what happened here, and I think it's a real societal issue that we need to address in terms of our roadways and keeping people safe on the roads.
You know, part of that is, and I want to say this very carefully because we have a grieving father of that child, but he did jaw with this person, Dan. You know what I mean? There were windows rolled down and there were words exchanged. If I'm in the car with my kids and we have a road situation like Laura describes, I'm going down the road. I'm not taking any chances. Again, I'm not blaming the father. He had no idea what was going to happen. But to Laura's point, it is a thing, isn't it, this road rage thing? We've all witnessed it on the road, being behind people, jawing at each other, going, oh my God, are they going to start shooting? You know, that kind of a thing.
But I just have to say, without a gun, this is a very different situation. This is maybe following you to a gas station.
That's right.
This is maybe, I think it's unlikely in most situations that it's running the person off the road, because you run the risk of being injured yourself if you're the road rager. Without a gun, this is a very different dynamic.
Right.
So road rage, fine, but the issue is the gun.
Well, I agree with that, but at the same time, we don't know how this guy got the gun.
That's
No,
true.
we
We
certainly
have no idea.
don't.
We don't know how many rules.
No, that's okay. I mean, obviously we're going off in a much deeper conversation, and I'm not going to go down the road too much. I don't agree with Sophie on the Second Amendment. I think it's very clear. You know, I think the problem is at the end of the day, look at what's happening. Look at these shootings that are happening in gun-free zones, gun-free cities. Chicago, Washington, D.C., New York City, some of the strictest gun requirements to purchase a gun, and yet they're leading in the killings. So I think
Contrast that with Massachusetts, which has, and actually a college friend of mine has written a really interesting piece, Lawson Clark, about this. He is a gun owner in Massachusetts. He talks about how hard it is to get a gun there. He has an interview with the police. He has to go through training. There are long waiting periods. Much lower rate.
But you know, we've got these completely gun-free zones, and so at the end of the day,
Let me ask you, Sophie, we're about a minute here. To Sophie's point, we're awash in guns here. I mean, we have guns all over the darn place.
In New Mexico?
In New Mexico, right? Yeah, we've got so many guns. How do we turn the tide on the attitude about guns here?
There shouldn't be a turning of the tide on the attitude of guns, Gene. Guns don't kill people. Bad people with guns kill people. Whether it's a gun, whether it's a knife, whether it's a car, whether it's a baseball bat, they're going to find a weapon. For us to run around and give this false sense of security that says, well, if we confiscate all the guns and lock all the guns up and only give the police and only give the people here guns that should have guns, that we decide some hierarchy should have guns, we'll all be safer. The statistics say that's incorrect.
Interesting. We're going to have to wrap that there. We're going to follow up on this subject down the road. So so much here. Thanks for joining us this week. Visit us online at NewMexicoInFocus.org to hear what our panelists had to say about nominees to the New Mexico Supreme Court. I'm Gene Grant. As always, we appreciate your time and effort to stay informed and engaged, and we'll see you next week in Focus. Get a preview of what's coming up on the next New Mexico in Focus. It's easy. Sign up for our weekly email at NewMexicoInFocus.org.